So now that I have my first generic perspective scene that I can always use to start to work off of, I can set up a few scenes that I might use to start actually presenting this. And the best way I find to do this is to start making use of some of these bottom tools down here. We have the position camera tool, we have the walk tool, and we have the look around tool. These are really good tools that you can use to get yourself in place and in position that is a little bit more realistic and it feels a little bit more grounded. So let's start with position camera. When I click on position camera, what that gives me is an icon of a little person, and wherever you'll notice that it kind of is actively wanting to snap to different points on this model. So wherever I end up ultimately clicking on that person, on that icon that looks like a person, it's going to stick me in place on that that plane that I just clicked on. The next thing I immediately am faced with is that I now have an eye icon, and this works by clicking on your left button of your mouse and actually holding down on that left button and moving around. And what you're doing here is you are just looking around. So instead of orbiting, you're kind of still getting a 3D view and you're still getting that orbit feel, but now I am looking around and I'm grounded to that spot, so I'm not moving up and down. The minute I start to orbit, I'm now orbiting all over the place, and now I'm kind of like flying in space, and I have no real sense of purpose or place. But when I get back to my position camera tool and click on a face, it's once again grounded me in place. So I might use my look around tool to get a nice good view of where it is that I want to be and what it is I want to see, as if I'm actually standing on the ground in front of that. And now I can click on my scenes and add, once I decide I like what I'm seeing, I can add a new scene, and this time I would call it something like exterior 1, enter. Something a little specific, something I will know what that means. I might type in perspective, I might give it a little bit more definition, but we'll ultimately get to a point where we can go back and rename these scenes or clean them up if we want to. For now, what we're doing is we're just getting ourselves established. So now I would take my position camera tool again, and I might go right to the front door there and click right on that front door. Now, at this point I know that if I'm going to move back a little bit, I know that I've built this model such that the slab is sitting right on the ground plane. So if I put my position camera on the ground, if you look at the bottom corner here, it says that my eye height is 5'6". So if I want 5'6" to be my eye height, I can do that. I typically will do 4'6", because now that I work in set design, I know that we put our cameras a little lower quite often. So you can control the eye height that you're looking at. If you want to be seated, you could do 3'6" and kind of give a view of what it would be like if you're sitting down in a chair. So you can control your actual eye height here. Just kind of keep in mind as you're doing that where your ground plane actually is. And I say that because if I'm over here, where I know that I'm way lower than the actual 0 point of this model, so if I'm somewhere over here on the street, it's going to say that my eye height is -2'5" and 1/16, and that's very specific. But I can remind myself that I'm actually way lower than the ground plane that SketchUp has decided is the default ground plane, which is our kind of 0, 0, 0 of the red, blue, and the green axis. So that's much lower than I really would be. It doesn't mean that I'm actually not still at 5'6" off of this ground. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's go back to our model and let's position, or let me go back to my model. I know you guys don't have this one. Let me position myself right at the door. And here's an example of when I might hide the door because it's in my way. And now we can see that now that we've got a larger model, you can see the reason it's so important to have all of these elements as specific groups and as different items, because you want to be able to potentially hide something that's in your way, but still have it exist while you're presenting. So let me just type in 4'6" here to bring myself down to a little bit of a nicer view. And here's another opportunity for a good scene. So I'm going to click Add Scene, and I'm going to name this scene Entry. Enter. Now I'm going to use my walk around tool because I'm at the eye height that I like, which is 4'6". So if I use my walk around tool, this is another one where you hold down on the left click. It looks like a pair of feet. And what walk around does is walk around allows you to not bump into anything. So as you're moving through your model, it forces you to stay at the same eye height, and it creates this kind of almost video game-like movement through your model, and it won't let you go through walls or won't let you go through anything solid. So if you're going up against some stairs, it'll actually take you up the stairs as you move. So it's a really useful tool because you can kind of really get a good sense of walking around through the space. So let's say I decide that I've got another view I like, and I pull out a little bit here to this view like that. And again, I'm holding down my left click, and I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to select this name and type in Dining. Enter. Okay. So this is the kind of thing I would go through the entire model, and I would start setting up a few of my very, very basic scenes. And that way, as I add to them, as I add my materials, if I decide to come in with molding here, I can always get back to these scenes. So let's see what this looks like. So I'm going from my perspective to my exterior to my entry, and you'll notice there's kind of a smooth movement between, but then I haven't created a very smooth transition between entry and dining, so it's going to pull me between those two scenes, and it's going to actually pull me through the geometry. So in order to fix that, from my entry scene, what I'm going to do is use my feet to move around like this and get a little view of the living room, and I'm going to add a scene there called, you guessed it, living. Enter. Now when I go to my dining, I'm not going to go through any geometry. So you can go in and you can add scenes in between. So if I'm at my entry, now I'm at my living, and finally my dining scene. So I've omitted that little going through the walls bit. You can also move your scenes up and down. And if you decide you want to change something about a scene, let's say when I go to my perspective 1 generic, for example, I decide I want my roof to be gone. I want to be able to see down into this upper floor, and I want to also change the view a little bit. So I want to look a little bit down into it. I still have all of this stuff selected. It's all properties that are going to be saved. If I go up to my actual tab, right click, and go to Update, it's going to update this scene. Another thing you'll see is, you see how I just got that pop-up? In some of the newer versions of SketchUp, you get this pop-up that lets you know that generating thumbnails takes a lot longer to view. You can view your scenes as large thumbnails, details, all of that stuff. I really, really don't like this feature because it takes a lot more time, and I'm fine with my list because I can see them as I go. So I typically click on Don't Generate Thumbnails for my model when that pop-up comes up. And I like to view my scenes as a list because it's just, eventually in some models I've got 35 scenes, 40 scenes. It gets kind of crazy. If I want to bring that roof back, I can just undo hiding that, and I can just move back to generally where I was, right click, and update that again. So here's where I would click on Don't Generate Thumbnails for this model. Now I've got my exterior shot, and I go back to my perspective just to check, and it's saved the way I want.